This episode of Design Between the Lines is brought to you by International Market Centers. You're listening to Design Between the Lines, the only design and home furnishings podcast where we talk with the movers and shakers, industry innovators, and lifetime legends of the home furnishings industry. It's here that I get a chance to sit and chat with the influencers shaping the industry into what it is today. A veteran of the furniture industry, Steve Wilcox came from a family retail tradition and a business management background. He is a graduate of Kendall College of Art and Design, where he received a BFA in Furniture Design and Product Development. Currently, he is the owner of Furnishings Design Incorporated, a design and marketing consultancy. In addition to this, Steve is an adjunct professor at Kendall College of Art and Design. Steve's range of design, development, and engineering experience across a multitude of furnishings categories and channels is second to none. During his career, his skills have been utilized by a broad list of esteemed clients such as John Whittaker, Heckman, and Value City, just to name a few. So Steve, welcome to Design Between the Lines.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm gonna, like I always do, I'm gonna head you back to when you were growing up in a family retail business. I guess family retail businesses, whatever they may be in, tend to become part of your family life, don't they?
Yeah, I think they do. They definitely get into your DNA. And I credit my father, who was kind of one of those classic stories. First kid off the farm. He was a good student, got a scholarship, and went to pharmacy school. And I have two sisters. They are pharmacists as well, but I happen to be the black sheep of the family. And I give my mom the credit there because she was more of an artist. And but the two benefits there is my dad's business was really that classic old school small town business. And I started, doing the sanitary stuff around the store, cleaning the bathrooms, and started at the bottom, and then eventually worked up and helped my father in the pharmacy. And very much customer service oriented. As the retail environment went more to big box stores, my dad was still a very successful small businessman up until 2000, when he eventually retired and did sell the business. But I can remember sitting down for our holiday evening meal, Christmas Eve meal, and we'd get a call from a patient who had forgotten to get their heart medicine refilled. And we would get in the car, go down, drive to the pharmacy, put 6 pills in a bottle and deliver them. And we'll see you on Monday, but we'll dock those from your next prescription. But really gave a great example of a service provider, which is exactly as designers is what we do. Mm-hmm. And then to give credit to my mom, she on vacations, she would drag us all over the Eastern Seaboard, seeing antebellum homes and gardens and architecture. And so in high school, as electives, I took every single drafting class I had. But strangely, I never took a standard art class, to make, clay sculptures and drawing and things like that. So, But I certainly have an appreciation for art and architecture from those two things, and appreciate the business background my dad gave me.
That's major experience for you, especially where you ended up in your career. Later on, we'll talk about that. Yeah. You went to Kendall. I'd love to hear about your the most important things you learned while there. I mean, what was that experience like for you?
The path to Kendall was, I naturally went into business. I didn't have the math chops for architecture, and as a student, and I loved retail, working with people, providing services. So I went into business management. I worked for about 2 years in a variety of retail management jobs, and the hours were poor. The pay was not great. I've had the great fortune of graduating and seeking work during recessions in our economy. And so I just decided I needed something a bit more specialized. Mm-hmm. And so I had a friend who's been in the contract industry, Mitch Baker, who was in Holland, Michigan now. He has a design firm. And he just suggested, you ought to check out Kendall. And so I was newly married. We had a dual income at the time, and so I checked out the Kendall program and absolutely fell in love with it. And since I had that previous degree, I didn't have to do any of the general education, and I could just jump right into the studio program. Mm-hmm. And so I probably went through a little too fast. I did like 3 years of those studio classes in about a year and 10 months, and then graduated. But I just absolutely fell in love with, the history that I'd had by being exposed to architecture through my mom, and then the drafting experience in high school. Everything clicked in Kendall. And so I was very, very enthused about it, and I was very, very determined at that point to do well. But I had to learn all the art skills. I went through every single basic art class through all the furniture rendering and ornament program.
Was there a particular class that grabbed you more than another in the program?
I probably, as just a passion, I enjoy the rendering aspect. Mm-hmm. But I'm not that great of an artist. And I don't mean that, because we can all learn a new skill, sure. But I'm not a natural artist. I'm very much a draftsman. If you're familiar with the architect Frank Gehry's sketches, which are extremely free form and gestural, that's exactly what my sketches look like. I'm communicating basically to me, but it's when I get on the drafting board that something becomes at least presentable to someone else.
In that experience, did you find yourself kind of beginning to develop what you would call your style, define what your style is as you were coming to the end of your college career and heading into this period of time when you were working on the co-op program with John Whittaker? Were you developing your style at that time?
I still think that was probably a little premature at that point. I was still learning what I call the 8-scale elevation rendering method. That's just classic Kendall. I mean, you can look at a sketch from all over the world and go, yeah, that's a Kendall sketch from the classic days.
Yeah.
And so, but I always loved the drama of industrial design rendering. And so I would at times try to incorporate some of those skills into like the chalk and the lighter fluid kind of mix, very toxic. But I would love to mix those colors and do those backgrounds, and then you would lay the rendering over the top of that and create some drama. I also once did a cross-section molding exercise on the computer. So this would have been very, very early Apple. And I got told in no certain terms, never bring anything computerized back into this classroom again, ! Which is of course quite humorous now.
Oh, certainly.
But for me, I've always had that interest in the graphic aspect of it. And early on, after I learned CAD, I used Photoshop and some of the industrial design rendering techniques out there. Illustrator might have been another example, but I've stuck with Photoshop to just enhance CAD elevations with shadow and textures. And then eventually, for probably 1999, 2000, really took to 3D modeling, which really helps me communicate my vision through those programs and the school set and the skill sets that those develop. But really spent a lot of time trying to be decorative, because a lot of those early renderings are very stiff and plastic. Things come off very plastic looking, and it's just not appropriate for residential furnishings. So I've tried to spend a lot of time getting good, developing those 3D modeling and rendering techniques to bring the beauty that the furniture we design deserves.
So you started your working career in design and development with John Whittaker.
Correct.
You did a little co-op work for them when you were in school, and then you took a position there. What did you do? Just because I think some people may have the idea that you get the corner office with a view of the flagpole on day one. So tell me about your experience.
Well, Whittaker, there's always things you learn at a job. And And Whittaker was a fantastic place to start. Evidently, the instructors at Kendall had been notified that they needed some help. Whittaker needed some help. And again, Whittaker was just beautiful old school Grand Rapids furnishings. Their main strategy was to produce goods that were similar to what were being offered in the auction houses at the current time, or there was a collection that was unique and different. And so, small quantities, but just beautiful finishes and exquisite construction. And probably the best thing for me as a student, I went there and was doing detailing, full scale on the board, and learned a lot about quality engineering, et cetera there. And that's, I think, one of the challenges for younger students. A quick little side trip here, is the fact that a lot of students won't be working in the factory in their first job, which, we had the sample makers 10 feet from my office. And no, it was not a corner office. I did have a window, but it was a big sheet of plywood with a bad stool and some fluorescent lights. But it was definitely a factory office, and it had great steam heat from about 1890, that you just wear shorts into the office most of the winter. And but just really fantastic people to work with, and just be able to soak up the finishes. Every Friday I would walk around the shipping area just to see what had been crafted that week. But fantastic experience there. So I hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That ties things together well. You moved from there on to Heckman, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct. Actually, I did a 2-year stint in between that at BIFMA, the Office Furniture Trade Association. And again, I was laid off during, again, poor recession, or poor economy and bad recession. And I was the third person at Whittaker at that point. But I had also moved up into engineering. They did transfer me from the design office up to engineering. And so, again, if I can just dwell on Whittaker a second. So I worked on my own design sketches, and I would be working on something. Go, what idiot drew it that way? Oh, that was me, So, and I put together route packs and designed decorative hardware and watch them buy veneer logs. And, it was just like I said, a fantastic experience. But was laid off, and then went to work for BIFMA. And, from West Michigan, office furnishings are certainly a part of the culture around here, and was very glad to get a job at this trade association. Now, I was the standards and performance standards manager, but within a couple months, I'm sitting in meetings with presidents, and I'm reporting back to the industry on a lot of issues that affect the marketing and sale of furnishings, such as international standards, flammability, ergonomics. And so again, I was the kid, and I just soaked up a lot of things, and I was able to I worked with a lot of senior engineer managers, primarily were my contacts at the different companies like Knoll and Steelcase and Herman Miller and Hayworth. And
a lot of that, wasn't that a lot of that at that time? You were developing additional standards, and the 5.1, the 5.2, some of these other seating standards, the whole development of people of 1 8-hour shift, multi 8-hour shifts in the same seating, movement, articulation, all of that stuff. You really that was kind of the cutting edge, moving into things were moving rapidly when you were there. Isn't that right?
It was. And, it just gave me a more global perspective.
So you had this 2-year stint at BIFMA in the standards of the contract industry. Tell me a little bit about how the job at Heckman came about. How'd that come to your path?
Okay. Well, I had, as you said, been at BIFMA, but I was not designing. I had that taste at Whittaker, and definitely wanted to get back to that. And so a position came open at the Heckman Company in Grand Rapids, and I applied for it. And I found out later that I was one of the late applicants. And so I always tell students, make good friends of the placement people at the college you go to. Bring them flowers and donuts. I guess it's not donuts anymore, but make good friends with those placement people. But I was told about that job and interviewed and was fortunate enough to have secured that. And so I moved from BIFMA into Heckman. Mm-hmm. And again, my Whittaker experience was good, but the Heckman people did like to see larger amounts of product leaving. And so I was introduced more to production on a larger scale. There were two factories, one in the Carolinas and one in Grand Rapids. And also I was in charge of the showroom. And so I was able to learn more of interior design and management of the team. And of course, learn the whole high point process.
Mm-hmm. Were there some successes and failures, as we all have in this business from time to time?
Certainly. That's a big question. I'll limit it to first to success.
Okay, very good.
Heckman at the time was doing a lot of 18th century, very shiny, beautiful finishes. I like to mention too, I've had some neat experiences working with people, and I love the collaboration aspect, and I'm always picking people's minds. But Ray Sabota, one of the early graduates of Kendall, still had some product being produced by Heckman, and got to work with him. And the funny story was I once made a suggestion to his designs, and he just said, no. Here's a kid, telling a guy with probably 50 years experience how he should change something. He just, no, not going to do it. Okay. I just lost track of my question.
Successes and failures. This is a success you're about.
So at the time, I just happened to come in when some of the casual distressed finishes were really hitting popularity in the market. And I just very simply looked at our product line and said, we don't have any of that. And so we developed two collections. One was made out of hickory, which was, certainly a beautiful wood, and everybody in manufacturing kind of liked that because I got to order all new tooling because it's such a dense wood.
Yeah.
And then we did another kind of hybrid collection that was 18th century, but it had a dressed down finish and still used fancy veneers that Heckman was known for. And I remember going to the market that year, and it was just like shoulder to shoulder cocktail party. It just really hit well. And Heckman was more of a niche player in that we provided a lot of goods in the occasional area that a lot of the bedroom and dining room plants just didn't have time to do. Uh-huh. And it was just a lot of fun. Just, probably early to mid 90s at that point. The economy was still going very well, and it was just a great success. Some of the other failures are, if I could talk to students, is at times I get a little too far ahead of the industry, and I think something might be good, but I've learned that sometimes the time's just not right, and you need to stick that away for a while. But I've had a number of products that just failed miserably because it just wasn't time, and you get better at judging those as you go along.
Well, and as you're mentioning this, and I've been through a few of these myself, all of this is something that you tend to learn from, of course, and it also, each little process of success and failure tends to help you develop your design process to be more effective, to be more efficient, possibly to be more creative in terms of what can be done at certain factories, et cetera. How did these things along the way help you to develop your design process?
Yeah, certainly the experiences with each manufacturer broadens your horizon. Let me jump from Heckman. After 6 or 7 years there, I was hired by the Schottenstein Stores Corporation down in Columbus, Ohio, which at that time owned Value City Furnishings. Mm-hmm. And, I had never really been in the lower end price points of the market. And when I went there, I was asked to bring my higher end experience, and we developed the brand American Signature. But now I was working for a retailer. I was welcomed into all of the showrooms in High Point. And so again, observation and comparing and contrasting is probably the design skill that I learned best there.
So literally, as you say, you were suddenly on the other side of the desk.
Exactly. And so I learned the whole retail side, and they had their pick and, they could pick and choose between the different vendors that they brought in. And I was also, at that point, we were developing, of course, our own line to differentiate our products from other people, which makes sense. Importing was really getting going. I had touched on that a little bit with Heckman with components. But now, that's the way the industry was trending. And I traveled extensively in Asia, as many other Kendall designers have done, and learned the factories and learned how to communicate with, your design intention. And thankfully, I've had a couple real positive collections there. But really, the Schottenstein Stores Corporation owned a lot of other retail businesses. They owned American Eagle Outfitters. They owned Filene's Basement. And so suddenly I was part of this bigger retail organization, and that helped expand my horizons just in what was possible.
You, I would imagine, had a lot of international travel involved in your work with them. Was that a big eye-opener for you as far as, getting things done?
Certainly. It is amazing. Our industrial revolution took 100 plus years, and in Asia, every time I would travel over there, there'd be 15 miles of new highway. And, it was the Wild West. I mean, it really was. And there's good and bad things about that. But I remember traveling once to far west China, and, that added 3 days to our trip, just the traveling out there and doing some work. But overnight we had samples made within 12, 14 hours of me putting pencil, to paper. And so that's pretty neat. I love to see the motivation of skilled trades. And it's nice to be a part of that. After my experience at Value City, I returned to West Michigan. We had a lot of family things going on. And so I established my freelance firm. And again, it's, I like to say I'm kind of like a country attorney. Whoever walks through the door, I'll represent in court. In my case, I'll draw for. Right. So, I do residential work. I've broadened into anything from pet products to healthcare products.
Hospitality, right?
Hospitality, other contract furnishings, and so all over.
Being an adjunct professor or faculty member at Kendall now, teaching students regarding the topics of industry trends, professional practices of design. I know that you're imparting this experience and this knowledge that you've gained over the years to them on a daily basis. And I'm hoping they're soaking it in. And if they haven't, they can listen to this podcast for sure. But one of the things you've done recently, and I was totally impressed with this. I know you know this because of my comments, but was a multi-part LinkedIn series that you named All I Really Needed to Know I Learned in Furniture Design School. Tell me a little bit about, first of all, where did that come out of that little head of yours? When did that pop up and say, this would be a great idea? Tell me about that.
Well, I was asked about 6 years ago to help prepare the students for the industry. Okay, so with that basis, I as a freelance guy and really a one-man shop, I think the power behind social media is just incredible. And in general, with the trends in the consumer population going from baby boomers just to millennial, there are certainly differences. And I like to use the analogy for the baby boomers, Miller Lite was fine. It was generic and everybody wanted the same stuff and it was fine. Well, look at the beer market today. Everybody wants a craft beer. There's 8,000 brands in every local town. There's a pub in every old gas station around the nation. And that's kind of the new market. And I think there are some lessons to be learned there. Furnishings are somewhat the same way. It's a global market now. It's an incredible time to buy furnishings. And Jerry Epperson is a great friend of the class that I teach. Mm-hmm. And I love the way he puts it. People buy furniture during happy times in their lives, when they have a child or when a new relationship or a new home. And Those are things that need to be communicated. And I think the furnishings industry for a lot of years had just kind of stopped evolving, not in a bad sense. It was just very efficient at what it did, kind of like a shark. You know, they say that life form stopped evolving many millennia ago. But we've had to change recently. And with the change in manufacturing and this new group of, larger than the baby boomers coming through, they have no problem and no fear buying furniture in different styles and decorating their homes in different ways. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity. But the social media aspect is we need to communicate those things individually as designers, as well as an association of designers, and I think as an industry. And so this is just my little part of trying to communicate that. And it's been kind of amazing. I've got some other things planned for the future, but doing that series based on, of course, that pretty famous book from a number of years ago, Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. I've just tried to change it to, a little tongue in cheek for, I learned in furniture design school. And it's primarily directed towards students, but I've gotten some good responses from, different people in the industry, from small manufacturers around the world through some fairly, influential people within some larger companies. And so it's part of what I feel is my responsibility to promote my own business, but also promote our vocation as designers.
Right.
And then, I'm a very optimistic person. I think we can play win-win, and it promotes our industry, and it gets our story out there to the greater population.
Current trends in the industry. You mentioned a little bit in terms of how people are buying and the change that's occurring with the social media, and frankly, with people buying online stuff that our generation would never have bought online. Right. We would go down and kick the tires. They don't think about that as much anymore. They do think a lot about the story behind something. I'm finding that out from others that I've talked with. Where do you see the trends in the industry? Maybe segregated into residential, maybe what you see heading in the contract industry, and maybe hospitality. Start with whichever one you'd like.
To me, the basis for all of those is really the consumer. And that's a trite saying that every business consultant would say, but consumer lifestyles are really where I derive a lot of the DNA for the features and benefits of products. And it goes, basically, become a student of the segment of the industry that you're in. And if it's residential, I look at the competition. What's going on out there? What are their smart teams looking at? Regarding what are the products they're introducing? What are the materials they're using? What are the finish characteristics? I also, another one of my favorite sayings is, I think, attributed to Einstein, which is true genius is knowing who to ask and where to look it up, and we have the internet, we don't have to purchase catalogs anymore and stockpile them in our offices, because we just have to open up our phone and see the latest introductions from different people and what's going on in other parts of the world that might affect our market, what's going on in Europe in particular. So the regionality is very important.
So that's having an effect on design trends because people are traveling more. I mean, certainly not right now. We're speaking during the COVID-19 situation. So no, but before this, yes, people were traveling, and you saw more and more influences from various people's travels all over the world.
Right.
And that's, I guess, happening every day.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting. I'll move to contract furnishings a minute. Okay. And I've done, modular office things at Heckman for the executive office, et cetera. And then I've dabbled in wood-based contract furnishings. And, the markets are so different. They have their own language. They have their own, distribution systems. And Neocon is certainly a fun show to go to. Everything's open. You don't get kicked out of showrooms. And but really the actual dollar size is significantly different. In fact, I think the contract furnishings for all of North America, Mexico, Canada, and the US is about a tenth of what the residential market is for the United States alone. But it's amazing how the casualness of, again, consumers are directing it. And I've seen a big change from slick corporate offices into more, I just call it pub-based interiors, where if everything is kind of now like the Heartwood and it's not all the same and it's very casual and relaxed. And, I went through that transition between wearing a tie and a suit to the office to wearing jeans. And the younger consumer and the younger worker are not going back. They are wearing very casual, comfortable clothes, and the interiors reflect that, even in the office. And, even the idea of these corporate buildings that are just collective places for freelance workers to come work is an amazing concept and trend. And so here's my point from a product development standpoint. I think it's going to get harder for us as designers to really have big successes like we've had in the past, just because the distribution channels have changed. And each of the younger consumers says, I can have exactly what I want when I want it at pretty much the price point I want. So at the same time, there's the whole online sales channel, which, you only need one or two successes there to convince you that, that's a significant channel. And so, it's an exciting time. I try to tell the students it's a great time to be graduating with a degree, especially the Kendall degree in furniture design.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. As you said earlier in our conversation, in some ways on the contract office side, you're seeing the development of products that makes people happy. Not that it's supposed to look like, but what makes them happy while they're in a working environment. We both agree we should not have tight collars and ties.
Yeah. Well, let me just take a quick side trip there too. I've had the great opportunity to work with a couple of high-end interior designers. And again, I am not an interior designer. I'm a product designer. And I highly respect their ability to decorate and plan an interior. And it's been fun to work on I've helped them develop their products and their highly decorative designs. But I think that's part of the future. Even you see in some more major collections from some of the major residential companies, everything's curated now. Everything is as though you have traveled the world or been antiquing every weekend and put together your interior based on a unique vision, even though you're trusting in the end consumer is trusting in the design experience of either a celebrity designer or us as kind of the silent designers behind the scenes. And but it is, like I say, it's an exciting time. But every distribution channel, every manufacturing method can be significant. It's more fingers than I have to enumerate the wonderful pearls of wisdom you've laid out for students and those others of our audience that are interested in design of all types. Well, thank you. Is there any advice, Steve, that you would give a student listening right now that's thinking about designing product, furniture, for example? Sure. Is there any advice that you might, parting advice you might give them? Great people. That's one of the things I talk about. Is there great people in the furniture industry? It's like I say, it's a product that is based on people's happiness and their lifestyles. Mm-hmm. So that's exciting. Economics, things look good. Home starts or household creations, as Jerry Epperson would call it, yes, are growing for the next 8 to 10 years, which is great for us and manufacturers. I tell them our consumer goods are going up against a lot of competition for the consumer's discretionary dollars. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we have to be really good at what we do. And some of the students are very strong artists. Some are not so much. But basically, a lot of that can be enhanced by 3D modeling. And I do believe, even though it is perhaps a little less personal as an artist, it's still a very strong tool. And of course, there's the 3D modeling, there's the CAD work, and then there's like the photorealistic rendering. And they're all, at time, you got to spend a lot of time in a dark room to get good at it. But I tell them that's a very, very important skill. And the other thing is just take it seriously. And so here's my final point. Sure. I talked with Sid Langer at one point. We were sitting in an airport in Hong Kong. We had this conversation. And we estimated that the total number of Kendall furniture graduates from the 30s through this would have been about 2000 was probably 400 students at that point. And then we conjectured that perhaps half of those had practiced very seriously within the industries. So, and I think my last number, again, from Jerry Epperson, was the residential furniture industry is about $112 billion. Okay, so per capita, over all of those years, the influence that a Kendall designer has on the industry is staggering. I don't know of another design profession that one person, because again, Kendall has advertised that about 80 to 90% of residential furnishings designs, until really it became more global, were from Kendall designers. And I don't know of another industry or another vocation where you can go from student to significantly participating professional in a short amount of time. But I tell them the Kendall design degree in furniture is like finding a jewel in the desert. It's an amazing thing if you take it seriously. But you have to study. You have to take it seriously. You can help a company. You can help the workers at that company. You can help your family. You can help your charities that you support. You can help yourself by being a good, furniture designer.
Wow. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you for your time today and your energies and your intellect and the benefit of your experience. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Well, John, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate your work in promoting our vocation and the industry.
Design Between the Lines is produced by Element Studio with the International Society of Furniture Designers. We record in High Point, North Carolina. To find videos of these podcasts, be sure to subscribe to the International Society of Furniture Designers YouTube channel. To learn more about ISFD, visit isfd.org. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more industry stories of Design Between the Lines.